Well, I had a wonderful team to work with, so that helped a lot.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Is Sylvia joining us?
Yes, she said she would be joining us, yes.
Yeah. Did you send her the link?
Yes, I sent her the YouTube link.
Oh, the YouTube.
Yes, but I can also send her the Zoom one.
Send her this one so we can see her.
Yeah.
Já estamos no YouTube.
Mas já está gravando lá?
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
Sylvia Bernardini is there.
Oh, tell her to come here. This is a nice, so we get to see her. How's the weather there, Adriano?
It's nice.
Warm?
Yes,
Nice.
it's definitely warm. I have my window closed because it's noisy outside, so it's really warm.
Okay. But are you in Forli?
Yes, yes, I'm in my place in Forli, yes.
Okay.
There she is.
Oh, nobody joining us? What's happening?
They are arriving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, nobody joining us? What's happening?
They are arriving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no message from you on my WhatsApp, Adriano.
Oh.
Strange.
Yes. Maybe you don't get messages from numbers you don't have.
Oh, here it is.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Oh, where was it? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll put you in my contacts, so. Good, now you're here. Sylvia, here she is. Silvia, we want to see you. Ti voglio vedere.
Hello.
Hello.
Do you see me now?
Nope.
I do.
No?
How come? Not yet.
Maybe I should, maybe if I speak, you'll see the video, but do you see me now?
No. I have your name and you're muted according to my screen here, but I can see you.
Hello.
Hi.
Adriano, can you see Silvia?
Yes, I can see her.
How come?
I have no idea.
My camera is on. And
Hey Sylvia, how are you?
hello. Hi, Josir. How are you?
I'm all right. Good to see you here.
So we're using Zoom to just chat with each other.
Yeah.
Each from our homes.
Yeah.
I see Adriane.
Such a long time.
Rosanne, hello, hello.
Ah, now I see you. Hey.
Ah.
Oh, the problem is that I have this. I shouldn't did it for me.
Wow, that looks like a disco.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing.
The
Adriane. I'll let you go on with it, or I'll stop. Just.
Let's see if I can delete this, if I can remove it.
It's nice though.
Is it?
Yeah.
How are you doing, Adriano? I met you like 7 years ago, I guess.
Yes, it was a long time ago.
Long time ago as well.
Yeah. But nice to see you again, though, in
Nice
this.
to see you. Yeah.
It looks as if Stella's videos froze.
No, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll start because my connection is unstable, so I'm afraid, that something might happen.
Okay.
So first of all, thank you everybody for attending our EBRALC meeting this year. And thank you very much, Adriano, for accepting our invitation. And I'm going to introduce Adriano to you if you don't know him yet. Adriano is an associate professor in English language and translation at the University of Bologna and a member of the board of doctorate in translation, interpreting, and intercultural studies of the same university. He obtained a doctorate in English for special purposes from the University of Naples, Federico II. His main research interests are in the field of construction of linguistic resources, and he has been involved in several collaborative corpus construction projects, including the WECI and the EPTIC initiatives, as well as the EUROLECT Observatory. On the more descriptive side, his work focuses on corpus-based investigations of phraseology and terminology in native, translated, and lingua franca varieties of English. He teaches MA modules on translation technologies and has given invited seminars and lectures on corpus linguistics and statistics at various Italian and European universities. Now you can also include Latin American universities, right?
Exactly.
Okay, he has also extensively published in various international journals. It's our pleasure to welcome Adriano Ferraresi. The screen is yours.
Okay.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks for the invitation. I'm really, really, really honored to take part in EBRALC. I was tempted to say in an event happening in unusual settings, but I guess these are now usual settings, in fact. However, I know how, we all know, in fact, by now, how stressful and difficult organizing an online conference can be. So really my thanks go to the organizers for making this event possible. And of course, thanks also to the audience who's with me today or tonight, in my case. I'm speaking from my home in Forlì, Italy. Now, okay, yeah, I can share my screen. I'll just give me a second. I'll just see if I can. Okay, can you see the slides now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. So sorry I could not attend the mini cursos. My non-existent competence in Brazilian Portuguese did not allow me to. However, I followed yesterday DJ's presentation, which was in English. And in a way, my talk will focus on just one of the phases that she was mentioning, namely that of corpus building. My aim tonight or today is to provide guidelines, but better suggestions on how to build better corpora. And let's say I'm going to illustrate the case with cases from translation and terminology, because those are the fields I'm most familiar with. But I hope everyone will find something that is relevant for him or her, even though they are involved in other fields or other applications of corpora, say dictionary making, language teaching, or research, why not? And I'd like to start by borrowing a metaphor from Kilgarif et al., who were discussing the relationship that exists between corpus builders, corpus creators, which are the farmers in this metaphor, and those who use corpora, who are the cooks in this metaphor. So the people who use corpora for different applications. He was mentioning dictionary applications, but this also applies to other scenarios. And what he was saying was that no one can obtain good, reliable results when using a corpus if the corpus itself is not a quality one. So good cooks have to rely on good farmers. I'm going to focus on the farmers bit of this metaphor, but I'll get back to the cooks near the end of the presentation. The obvious question here is, what is a good corpus? What do we mean by a good corpus? Which is, I know, an ambitious question. I'll just try to provide at least a partial answer by mentioning some of the criteria that are most frequently mentioned when speaking about corpus construction or quality corpora. The first one I would say is representativeness, and which we can say that a corpus is representative when it is a good approximation of a certain language or language variety, meaning that any feature we observe in a representative corpus should also be observed in other texts belonging in the same language or language variety as the corpus itself. So it's really a sample that is representative of a larger population. A corpus has to be balanced, meaning that the different components of a corpus have to be in meaningful proportions. When we design a corpus, we should make sure that the size of each component of a corpus makes sense with respect to some explicit criteria that have to do with the population we want to represent. And of course, size, which is in a way implicit in also in balance, where the idea is that the larger a corpus or the larger a subcomponent of a corpus, the more representative that corpus or corpus component will be. Now, the list could go on, but I would say that most criteria of a good corpus have to do in a way or another with representativeness. So much so that Leach defined representativeness as the holy grail in corpus building, meaning if you want an elusive ideal, but one we should still try to achieve. Central to the notion of representativeness is the idea of a sampling frame. A sampling frame can be defined as a set of parameters that one should take into account when deciding which text to include in a corpus and which text to exclude. Now, this is the sampling frame that was proposed by Biber, which in Sinclair's terminology includes both text external and text internal criteria, meaning text external criteria are the criteria which have to do with the context of production of a text, like the channel in which it was published, say written, spoken, the format, whether it's published or not, or the setting. Text internal criteria are instead criteria that have to do with features of the text itself, rather than the context of its production. In this sampling frame, one example is purposes. So say whether a text is meant to persuade, entertain, edify. According to Biber, both external and internal criteria should be taken into account. According to Sinclair, only external ones are valid corpus building criteria or sampling criteria. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of this talk which sampling frame or which criteria you decide to adopt for corpus building. What is interesting to notice is that there has been a lot of theoretical debate on what we mean or what we should mean by representativeness and what a good sampling frame is or should be. A lot of theoretical debate, but at least according to Leach, a debate which was not followed up in practice. What Leach is saying here that we as corpus linguists have been guided by concerns with practicality, pragmatism, and opportunism. We know what a representative corpus is or should be, but then we end up with using what is already available, resources that are already available, or resources that can be relatively easily available. And now, I don't know whether you can relate or not. I can. But what is important is that Leach says, of course, this has deep consequences on our research efforts themselves. It is not by coincidence that this claim was included in a volume on the relationship between corpus linguistics and the web, published at a time when the so-called web as corpus approach was gaining popularity. Corpus linguists and computational linguistics got extremely excited about the possibilities that the web offered, especially for corpus building. And by web as corpus approach, we can mean 4 different things. I'll skip the first one because it's not so relevant here, and I'll just briefly describe the other 3. What do we mean by web as corpus approach? Well, we adopt a web as corpus approach when we use the web as a corpus surrogate. When we do something like this, say here I was trying to check which collective noun collocates with flamingos, which by the way is a flamboyance, or a stand colony regiment, or yeah, again, flamboyance. What I'm doing here is I'm using the web as if it were a corpus, and I'm using Google, thanks to its operators, the quotes and the asterisk, as if it were a concordancer. Now, second sense, the megacorpus mini web. At the time, many projects, so around 2005, 2005, many projects started. We changed to collect, to let's say, collect large quantities of data from the web in order to make really large reference corpora. for multiple languages. So adopting the same or comparable procedure, reference corpora well built. And here you can see the list. I guess you'll recognize at least a few corpora. Corpora that are available for a number of languages and that range, that have a sizes ranging around billions of tokens. And finally, the last sense, which is the sense that is most relevant for this presentation today, using the web as a corpus shop. We use the web as a corpus shop every time we select, download, and post-process web text semi-automatically. So when we use web data to build corpora that we then consult offline, mainly offline. And usually these corpora tend to be specialized corpora rather than reference corpora. So smaller, certainly smaller corpora compared to reference corpora, but corpora which are larger than other corpora which we can build manually. Okay, so the idea is to collect many texts for specialized corpora, so largish, let's say, specialized corpora. Two different outputs from this strand of research. It generated specialized corpora themselves, which are available online, and here you can find the list. But, and this is most interesting for me, this trend of research also generated tools to build specialized corpora. So tools that would allow users to collect text from the web. I'll get back to I'll present a few of these tools, but then before that, I wanted to say what is common in a way to all these approaches to the web as corpus. And what is common to me, or at least what used to be common to all these approaches, was this idea that more data is better data. In a famous paper by Kilgarif and Greffenstetter, they claimed that very large data set usually make up for deficiencies related to noise in the data themselves, or that they will be more useful than resources which are smaller and cleaner. So size as the guiding criterion in corpus building. Notice that this was the principle inspiring projects aiming to collect reference corpora, like in this first case here. And what I find interesting here is that they say that they wanted to collect text of good quality at a low cost, where good quality is equated with many documents containing full sentences, which is obviously a very different notion of quality with respect to the one I was mentioning at the beginning. But it also applied to projects interested in specialized, smaller specialized corpora like the ones used in terminology and translation. So again, large quantities of data in such a short time is good. Throughout the years, the position even of web as corpus scholars changed somewhat. And I would say that this quote is particularly relevant because it, in a way, shows that there is increasing awareness that size is not necessarily quality, that we should aim for quality resources beyond size. But also what is interesting here is that is highlighted that the real difference between traditional corpora and web corpora is not so much in the source of data. So traditional corpora can include web data. What makes the difference is the design effort. So to sum up, if we go back to our original question of what is a good web corpus, I would say that the desiderata are the same as the desiderata for a traditional corpus. A good web corpus is a representative, balanced, largish corpus, large or largish corpus. Plus, I would say it has to be a clean corpus, where by clean, I mean a corpus where we control for junk text. You all know how much junk there is out there when you surf the web. Duplicate text or boilerplate within text. Say, when you download several pages from a website, you obtain in your corpus multiple occurrences of words just because they are parts of menus or headers or footers, and that's a big problem. That can distort your corpus statistics a lot if all your texts come from the web and they've not been post-processed. Now, I would say that the last two features are not so much of an issue with web corpora nowadays, in the sense that it's relatively easy to collect large corpora and to obtain clean data. The cleanable share task was one of the ways in which tools were created to clean up web text. However, representativeness and balance are still a problem, are still an issue in the collection of web corpora. In the second part of this talk, I would like to, what I've been talking about until now is both reference and specialized corpora. The claims I made were applied, let's say, equally to reference and specialized corpora, but now I would like to focus more specifically on specialized corpora. First, because they are the type of corpus that we, as researchers or lecturers, are most likely to build. We are more likely to build a specialized corpus than a reference corpus. And the second thing is that I'm going to focus on tools that have a graphical interface. And the reason here is that I really think that having tools with graphical interfaces encourages people to build corpora. If no such tools are available, there will be many fewer people who build corpora and the discipline does not progress. Now, in the interest of time, I think I'm going to skip the first two tools. However, I'll skip them slowly so that when the YouTube video becomes available, interested people might pause the video and see what these tools look like and where they can find them. So TextEd and IceWeb, I won't discuss them at length, but I'll just skip them slowly, as I was saying, and then focus on the tools that I'm also going to use in the case study I'm going to present. Now, the first one is called AntCorpGen, and it's a tool that allows us to create discipline-specific corpora, which are based on academic articles published on a single website, which is PLOS ONE, which is it's not really a website, it's a database featuring freely available scientific papers. This tool has advanced search functionalities like search within only certain portions of the text, and also functionalities to only download specific parts of scientific articles. Now, I think that when you discuss a tool, it's not only important to discuss what it does, but to also highlight its potential drawbacks. And I would say that the most serious drawback of this tool is that if the aim, of course, is that of creating a discipline-specific corpus, we have to be aware that the texts that will be included in our corpus are single register or single genre. Not only that, but also text from a single source, which is PLOS ONE. So not all possible journals, but only the journals indexed in that database. Second drawback, it works. Here I write mainly for English, but my guess is that it only works for English. And third issue to be considered is that some subject areas are better represented than others. So natural sciences, medical research, and engineering papers are more represented than other disciplines, typically the humanities. And then we get to BootCat, which was there in the title finally. Now, this is a tool that has been developed in Forli. I would say that it's still being developed in Forli. It's an eternal work in progress, I would say. Now, it has many features that I think are very, very useful for corpus building, including the fact that first, it allows you to search and to find text using the same search functionalities that Google has. So you can exploit the full range of options that Google gives you to look for text on the web. It handles different file formats. It does boilerplate removal for you. You remember I was mentioning boilerplate before. BootCat is supposed to remove boilerplate for you, so to clean up text for you. It works, or is supposed to work, with any UTF-8 encoded language. Okay, so even minority languages, provided that they are encoded in UTF-8. What I like especially about BootCat is that it is modular. So there is let's say, a default pipeline. You can use all of these features in a sequence, but you can also just use one of those. So say collect text using some method and then using BootCat just for boilerplate removal. And I think this is really, really something that has to be highlighted about this tool. However, again, drawbacks here. It is heavily dependent on Google, meaning that if one day Google decides that it does not that it discontinues certain functionalities, or that it explicitly blocks applications like BootCat, BootCat stops working, and there's no way around it. It happened before. We found workarounds to problems, but Google might get to the point where they completely discontinue searches that can be automatized through BootCat. Second issue is that it allows limited control over corpus contents, especially if the procedure is highly automatized. So we can obtain many texts by Google searches, but then we still have to control what ends up in the corpus. Otherwise, really, we might be tempted to download everything and end up with a very unclean corpus. However, this is a point I'll get back to in a second. Now, I've presented a few tools just in terms of features. What I would now like to do is to really show you these tools at work. And as I was saying, here I'll be making an example from translation and terminology practice. But again, I hope you can see how the strategies I'm suggesting here can be applied to your specific field of interest. I have to say, I have to acknowledge that this is joint work by myself, Eros Danchetta, who is the mastermind behind BootCat, is the main developer of the interface of BootCat. BootCat was initially developed by Silvia Bernardini and Marco Baroni, but the interface is was designed completely by Eros Danchetta. And then it's joint work with Silvia Bernardini, with whom the resources I'm going to present were created. Okay, what is this application scenario? Our aim was to build corpora for a specialized translation task. Or better, we were preparing a course for a translation agency who were interested in building resources for specialized translation / terminology work. The task in this case was a translation from Italian into English of a website by an Italian biomedical company. So in the domain, let's say, of biomaterials, the biomaterial specifically focused on was hydroxyapatite, which is a bone tissue. So let's say bioceramics. That's the kind of technical scenario we are talking about. And this is the text that was supposed to be translated. Now, we decided that for this task, we would need two different specialized corpora. The first one would be a specialized corpus in English, so in the target language, that would be comparable to the source text in Italian in terms both of domain or topic and genre. So the very first set of texts we wanted to collect were basically company websites of companies working in the domain of biomaterials or bioceramics. Now, you might guess that this is really, really these are really, really strict parameters. If we just have this corpus, we might end up finding very, very few texts. So we decided to build the second corpus. specialized, always in English, which would be comparable to source text only in terms of domain topic and not genre. So in a way, a larger corpus that would provide still reliable corpus, which would provide an alternative view on the domain. So not of bioceramics. Let's start with the procedure we developed to build the first corpus. So the aim was to build a domain and genre-oriented specialized corpus. I'll start by illustrating the traditional BootCat procedure for those of you who do not know it. But then I'll tell you right from the start that this did not work. So the traditional BootCat procedure did not work. Now, in the traditional procedure, you identify seeds, so terms that are typical of the domain. If we go back to our text, now, don't know if any of you understands Italian, but then, or if you agree with us on the terms that might be typical of the domain, we can find like biomedical. And of course, what we have to do, since we have to build a corpus in English, we have to find terms, the translation of terms for which we sort of know the translation, or we are confident that we can translate reliably. So we started with a term like biomedical, which has few alternatives in English, and we would say the most plausible one is biomedical. And we went on like this. So we picked biomateriali, so biomaterials, maxillofacciale, maxillofacial, hydroxyapatite, human bone. Now, all these would become what we call seeds. There was also another term which was there and which looked interesting, which is chirurgia rigenerativa. However, in this case, I would not be confident that the exact translation for chirurgia rigenerativa would be regenerative surgery. So for the time being, we left it aside. We discarded this as a potential seed. In the second step, we can use BootCat to combine the different seeds into tuples. So random combinations of seeds. Of course, if you use just a single seed, like say biomedical, you are very likely to find texts that are not relevant for your text. If you combine multiple seeds, you are much more likely to find texts that belong in the domain you are interested in. This is what tuples look like. In the third step, Google turns tuples into Google queries. Now, so you see it, if you click on open all in browser, what BootCat does is it opens a browser window, and for each tab, you have in each tab a different query based on the tuples you built. Of course, you realize that this is not ideal. Okay, ideally, you would want everything within the application. So to be able to do everything within the application, this is not possible. Again, because Google at some point decided that it would not allow automated queries. And then all other search engines, including Bing and Yahoo, decided to do the same. So now this is a workaround that still allows us to use Google, but is not really convenient because we have to go to a browser and then go back to BootCat. Now, in terms of results, you see that there are texts which are okay with our sampling frame, like this one, which looks like the website of a company working in the domain of biomaterials, but you also get many texts that are not appropriate in terms of genre. These are scientific articles, evidently. So we decided that the traditional procedure would not be the right one for us. So we moved on and devised an alternative procedure. So we tweaked, in a way, BootCat so as to obtain more relevant results. And what we decided to was we decided to not start from terms, but start from relevant, not to start from relevant terms, but rather to start from relevant sources. So we looked for companies in the same sector as Finceramica for the English website of these companies. And we found a few. We found a few like this one or like this one. So notice we are using, in a way, a text external parameter for corpus building. Second step, we used the operator site which is understood by Google as meaning look for relevant pages within these websites. We found 11 websites of these companies. We got the results, and then what you have to do, as I was telling you, you go to a browser and you have to save each results page manually. You have to do it manually. There's no way to automate this, unfortunately. But then BootCat does the rest. So given the results provided by BootCat, it collects all the URLs, it downloads them, it cleans them, it discards pages if they are too short or too long. It does some content filtering. And you get to the point where you have a corpus. This took, say, without considering the procedure of identifying relevant websites, it took like 15 minutes, less than that. This is the output. So you get a corpus, you get a folder where you have one text per file. So the corpus folder there is, the format is one text per file that you can use, for example, with HandConc. A corpus in XML format that you can upload on Sketch Engine, and a report file containing minimal metadata, like the URL from which the different texts were downloaded. Okay, now, second type of corpus. Okay, so here we use BootCat, second type of corpus. We wanted to build a domain-oriented specialized corpus, and we thought that, in fact, scientific articles would be an appropriate, rich, and reliable source of information on the domain. Here we were not interested in the genre, but just in the domain. We could have used BootCat for following the traditional pipeline. Remember the first results I showed you, but we know that BootCat does not work well when having to download scientific articles for a number of reasons. So what we thought we would use another tool which is designed just to download scientific articles, which is HandConc. Now, here you see the parameters. This is the tool I was mentioning before. We used hydroxyapatite as a search criterion. We looked for this term either within the title or the abstract of the papers. We downloaded, and we decided to download just the title of the paper and the body. So notice that using this tool, you can automatically discard references and all other potentially irrelevant section of web papers, of papers. We limited our search results to 100 hits. They were more than enough for our purposes. And these are the resulting corpora. Now here we get 73 texts. Notice that we had to perform some manual selection of text because not all texts were really relevant, looking at the URLs. And we got a larger corpus we got nearly the same number of texts, but a much larger corpus for the scientific articles corpus. We still don't know whether, the next question is this corpus good for our purposes? Now, impressionistically, I'll just show you like a very, very first attempt at evaluating the corpus. And what I'm going to show is whether we can find an appropriate translation for the seed that, for the potential seed we were mentioning before, chirurgia rigenerativa. Do we translate it as regenerative surgery? Well, we start by looking for regenerative, and we see that no occurrence of regenerative surgery is there, but rather regenerative medicine is there. And notice that this is attested both in the website's corpus and in the scientific papers corpus, which are the texts with the file name starting with an underscore. Second attempt, we looked to find a plausible translation. We looked for surgery, sorted results to the left, and we found reconstructive surgery. Again, both from websites and scientific papers, though I'm not sure whether reconstructive and regenerative surgery are actually the same thing. Okay, now this was very, very impressionistic. The problem remains, is this a good corpus? So have we been good farmers? For which we really need to find more systematic ways of evaluating corpora. You see up there ways forward, in the sense that these are really just suggestions for potential solutions. I'm not saying that they are valid solutions. My aim here is mostly to stimulate debate rather than really suggest working solutions. Now, we can say whether we have been good farmers if we evaluate the quality of a corpus post hoc. So once we have built the corpus, we have to assess whether it is a quality corpus or not. In the sense that even if we control in the design phase when building a web corpus, if some automatization is involved, we do not know exactly what texts end up there. Now, this is true whenever we build the corpus, okay? And we don't read each and every single text that we include in a corpus, but it is especially relevant for web corpora. The question is how to do it. A few years ago, like 20 years ago, nearly, Kilgarriff was suggesting that a method for corpus evaluation could be comparing corpora to other corpora. And this is relevant because, as you'll see, most of the methods I'm going to suggest in the next few slides are really based on comparison. But what I like especially about this quote, the main reason why I put this quote here is that Kilgarriff was saying that corpora are complex and multidimensional objects. So evaluating their quality has to be a complex and multifaceted activity. We cannot reduce corpus quality to a single figure. And this is what I'm trying to do. I'll be trying to do. So we have to evaluate different aspects of corpus quality. The first being, an example being lexical sophistication. We have built specialized corpora. So one question is, how lexically complex are the texts in the corpus? One tool to do this, one possible tool to do this is called Thales. Like all the other programs I was mentioning, this one too has a nice graphical interface. It really makes everything very easy. This tool has over 400 indices of lexical sophistication, but it only works for English. And it has been used in the past, for example, to identify genre differences within subcorpora. Just to give you an idea of the kind of output you get, if we evaluate lexical sophistication in the corpus we built, we can take different indices. Here, I'm using 2 out of the 400, which are the word familiarity score, which indicates how familiar a word is. This is based on psycholinguistic data, so human judgments. And a different index, which is the BNC frequency score. So an index of how frequent the words in your corpus are according to the BNC. The higher these scores, the more simple the text. So the lower scores mean less familiarity, and less frequent words. In many ways, these figures correspond to what we would expect, meaning that the company website have higher familiarity and higher frequencies compared to the scientific articles. At the same time, the standard deviation, so how evenly distributed these scores are within the corpus text, these standard deviations are lower in the scientific articles corpus, meaning that the texts are more homogeneous, and the standard deviations are higher in the company websites, meaning that these are more different texts. They are more varied. I guess you can immediately see the problems with this kind of approach. The first one being that these indices say nothing about the domain specificity of the vocabulary included in the corpus. They say nothing about terms typical of the bioceramics domain being there or not. For this, we would need a list of an external list, not derived from our corpus or our corpora, of validated terms. So terms which we can look up in the corpus, which we don't have. The second problem, as I was mentioning, is that these indices only make sense comparatively. They only make sense if we have something to compare them to, say, one other subcorpus, or if an external benchmark were available, a benchmark for which we know that a certain index corresponds to a certain degree of lexical specificity. I don't have a solution for the first problem. The second problem might so having an external benchmark might be partly the case adopting a second method, which is that of evaluating register variation. Here we are focusing on a different aspect. So registers contained within the corpus. The benchmark here, I was saying here we have a sort of benchmark, and the benchmark here is constituted by the registers, or genres if you prefer, identified by BIBER. In order to do this, we again have a tool, which is the multidimensional analysis tagger, which tells us how our text, the text in our corpus, positions themselves with respect to the registers that were identified by BIBER. So how similar or how different they are with respect to this benchmark. And I don't know if you're familiar with the procedure of multidimensional analysis. Here I'm simplifying things really a great deal. I'll be focusing just on one of the dimensions of this analysis, which tells us how persuasive texts are. So how much overt features of persuasion are there in the corpora. Now you see in the green oval how our website's corpus positions itself compared to other registers. Now, all registers which are not MAT websites are the registers by BIBER. And what we see there is that the score is sort of high, or certainly higher than many of the registers identified by BIBER. Whereas the scientific subcorpus gets much lower scores, meaning, and this in many ways corresponds to our intuition that websites are more oriented towards persuasion than scientific text. They have to be promotional in a way. Now, again, a lot of problems, like the fact that MDA says nothing about the domain specificity of vocabulary. And we can also ask ourselves whether these registers, which were developed to describe register variation in general English, are informative reference points for translation and terminology. In other words, what do we know? I mean, what can we infer if we know that, say, scientific texts are less persuasive than situated reportage? How can we interpret this? And this is really a question. Now, a few take-home messages. I'm getting to the conclusions here. For a long time, the label do-it-yourself web corpora was used as a synonym of disposable corpora. What I was trying to claim here is that this is not necessarily the case. Do-it-yourself web corpora can be valid research or practice, research objects or corpora that can be used in practical application scenarios, provided that time is spent first designing the corpus, so deciding on a sampling frame, and controlling for different parameters like the text sources, topics, and domains. So not just saying the text has to belong in a certain domain and I take everything I find, but I really control for text sources. And then I create my corpus by putting together different subcorpora that are controlled in terms of a number of parameters. Second thing I suggest we should do, we should spend time identifying search strategies to find texts, rather than spending time finding texts themselves. So once we have satisfactory search strategies, we can find many texts. And of course, we should carry out at least minimal text selection. We cannot take whatever we get from whatever tool we are using. Second, suggestions. Several tools are out there. We should not be afraid to use them, maybe in unconventional ways. The procedure I was showing you before using the site operator in BootCat was not originally conceived I mean, was not probably originally thought of by the BootCat creators. But then if you realize that that's a viable strategy, then use it. If you realize that you cannot create a corpus with 2 corpora with the same tool, just use 2 of them. That's, I guess, common sense. And finally, the big problem remains to me corpus evaluation. I provided some really suggestions, but it's really an open issue. Some shameless self-promotion here. I suggested a possible way to take into account termhood when evaluating corpus quality in this paper, in a paper published in 2019. If you're interested, please email me and I'll send you the reference. What I should highlight, or what I would like to highlight in closing, is that the issue of corpus evaluation is certainly an open issue for DIY corpora, do-it-yourself corpora. It is certainly an open issue for web corpora in general, but it also applies to corpora developed by others. And this is very well said by, I mean, I really have to quote here because it's expressed brilliantly. Now that many corpus management systems, it is possible to dial a corpus to your own requirements. What is important to note is that the burden of demonstrating representativeness lies with the user. So even if you're not building your corpus, but you're using someone else's corpus, it is your task to demonstrate that that is the best possible corpus for your purposes. And here I thank you, and I'm finished, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adriano, for an inspiring talk with so much information. So we have to sort of filter that also and put your, as you say, do it yourself, or put your hands, your shoulder to the wheel, and get used to these all these different tools and really start using them. As you say, I mean, you really have to test them. You have to try to use them, and that's the way. So we'll see if we have some questions now from the audience. If you'd like to stop sharing your screen, that would be okay. And Eleni is managing the questions.
Okay.
I think we have a question from Elisa, right? Talk, Elisa, talk.
Okay.
Please.
Where is Adriano?
I'm here.
Hi, Adriano.
No,
The first question I have for you is, when I went to Italy, I went to a beautiful plaza that was called something, I think it was Adriano Ferraresi or some other. Is your name common in Italy?
No, not that I know, but now that you mention it, I'll go and look for it everywhere.
Oh, it's a, yeah, it's,
Okay.
do you know where it is, Stella?
What? Bertinoro?
Bertinoro, maybe, I don't know. I was somewhere in Italy, but I'll let you know if I find out.
Yeah,
Well,
please do.
Okay, my question is, when you were saying about using seeds, that was the procedure that it actually didn't work very well for you. In BootCat, is there a maximum number of seeds that you can use? And what is that? No. Okay. And one part that I didn't get, it was too fast for me, is that you said something about you have to save every result page of Google. I didn't understand that part. Where do you save it? You just copy the link? How do you do that?
Yes, I was pretty fast about that. The new version of BootCat, I don't know if you've ever used it or what version you've used it, but yeah.
Decades ago.
Yeah, the new version of BootCat does not have, let's say, integrated search functionality. In the old version, you could simply type the tuples were looked for within BootCat itself. Now this doesn't work anymore, and it has to do with the fact that APIs, which were the mechanisms that was used in the original version of BootCat
Mhm.
were discontinued by every search engine we know. So what you have to do now, what BootCat does now, is it opens many different pages of search results by Google.
Mhm.
One page corresponding to one tuple. Say you look for dog, cat, home as a tuple, and then you get the search results. You get search results from Google. What you have to do from your browser, Firefox or Safari or Google Chrome, whatever you use, you have to save the HTML of that page.
Oh, I see. The HTML of the page. Okay.
File, save as HTML.
Okay.
And then what BootCat will do for you, it will extract the links from the Google results page and it will put them in an ordered list.
I see. Okay.
Was that clear?
Perfectly clear. Thank you so much. And what is the boilerplate? I didn't get the part about the something plate. Boilerplate. Boilerplate.
Yes. Okay. So boilerplate is those parts of a web page that are repeated across every single page in a website. Say
like
you
the
download
heading.
Exactly. Like you download a web page from Wikipedia, or several pages from Wikipedia, you will get the left menu on every page.
Yeah, I work with like recipes. I have a tiny little recipe and then 10,000, things and menus and
Exactly. Irrelevant bits of text. What BootCat does is it tries to guess which parts of the text are the content, so the body, real body of the text, and which ones are boilerplate, so irrelevant or noise in the page.
Okay.
And it
thank you.
The content.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for the talk. Wonderful talk.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We have another
question.
Hi. So please, I was trying to use BootCat, and I was trying to use on our website. I use the tool. I don't know how to explain, but when you can use the URL link where you can put the addresses and try to find the texts from that. Yes. I don't know if I'm okay. So the thing is, on this website, they have, I think, other URLs in the same web page, I guess. So I wanted all the texts from that part. I don't know if I made it clear. I'm sorry, but it's just one address, and in this address you have other sub addresses, I guess.
Okay, I see. And you wanted to download, let's say, the pages that were linked from that page.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, yeah, you can do that. Well, it's actually rather simple. What you can do, well, if I understand correctly, what you can do is you can basically copy paste the links from this page. Was it like a list of links?
Oh, when you have the numbers for page 1, page 2, page 3, so it's this kind of website. So you have the address, the main address, but I don't have the other one. So you can get the other ones only if you click on each icon to get.
I see. So say page 1 of the website, page 2, page 3, and you wanted to get all of them.
Yeah, all of them, and the sub icons. I don't know how to explain that.
That might be more complex. It's not as easy as I thought. What you can try there is TextStat, which is one of the tools that I skipped.
Okay.
And TextStat.
Okay.
And that can be used to download single websites. So you can use it to say you provide the starting URL, and then TextStat downloads every page that is linked from that URL.
Yeah, that's what I wanted.
Yes. Yeah. So that might be. It doesn't always work.
The name's TextStat.
TextStat. I can write it in the Well, in the Zoom chat, it's text stat.
Adriano, let me take I'll ask a question that's similar and that is related to what Elaine was asking. If it's a database that the website builds your response every time, like I think it's Aspen, or I don't know the names of the programming languages, I think they do not allow you to get the results because the result is like built the time when you ask. And that's when, and several websites are doing that nowadays. So we don't have access to that. Doesn't matter what you do, you have to copy each page, right? You cannot.
Yeah, I think you can try like looking at the URL. Sometimes it works, looking at the URL and see if you can see some structure to the URL. Say sometimes it's enough to change, say from EN to IT to get the Italian corresponding web pages, but then that doesn't always work, or better, it rarely works. It's really a trial and error thing. You try and then you try another strategy until you get one. And consider the possibility that it is impossible to automatically download certain websites. That can happen. And I saw a question in the chat on which is very much related to this one. So if there is a way to extensively crawl a whole website with BootCat, I wouldn't say so. I mean, BootCat is not really designed to crawl entire websites. Again, for this, TextStat might be better because it has an integrated functionality to crawl websites. What BootCat can do is it can download the pages that are indexed by Google. Say you can look for site, colon, and then the name of the website and get as many results as possible from Google, but then that's not a guarantee that the whole website is crawled. Okay, what do you mean by crawl a website? Meaning download all of it. When we say crawl, it means like downloading a whole website. So downloading all the different pages of a website. I don't know if there were other questions in the chat. Thank you, Adriano.
We have any more questions? No? No, if not, then Adriano, we just want to thank you very, very much for a wonderful talk. As somebody said, inspiring talk, great presentation, very clear. And now that we have it saved, we can always go back for all the references. Okay?
Yes, and
thank
if you
very,
want the presentation slides, I can send them to you. Just send me an email.
That would be wonderful.
Yes, I can send you the presentation. Just drop me an email and I'll send it to you.
Thank you. That would be great. Okay.
Again,
thank you very much.
Stella.
Have a good night.
Thank you. And good,
good
evening.
Ciao. Buonanotte.
Again.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adriano. See you.
See you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Segura aí, Elaine.
Sim.
Jenny, stay.
Deixa eu parar o YouTube.